Hey everyone, and welcome back to this week's Wargaming terrain tutorial. This week's video we're going to be making some really simple scatter terrain for the table. I will show you just here. So these are the scatter terrain pieces that we're looking at going for today. As you can see, just by adding a few extra elements onto these, they look really fantastic. Now you can see with this one here it has a flat back. That is so that we can place it up against buildings that we've made in the past. If anyone is interested in supporting the channel further, please remember to jump on over to my Patreon page, and I'd really appreciate any support. It really does help get these videos out. Thanks very much for watching. Remember to like and subscribe if you enjoy this video. I will have another one out very shortly. So let's get started and build this Rubble. Now for this build today, we're just going to start off with some really simple alfoil or aluminium foil. Now we're going to press this down really hard. Now you want to get the basic shape of the rubble you're looking for. So for this one, it is just a piece of general scatter terrain, a bit of cover for the battlefield. So we're going to push this into an oval shape, I guess. Now you want to make sure that you are pushing this down really solid. You don't want this to be sort of expanding over time or anything. So the best idea for that is to use a fair bit of pressure and make sure you're pushing this down pretty tight. You do also want to go around the edges here, making sure you're pushing in all these little thin pieces of alfoil that are sticking out the sides. You just want to make sure that, like I said, this isn't going to move around or change shape over time. So best idea is to push this down nice and tight, nice and hard, use a fair bit of pressure, and it should work out fine. Now for the next one, I've just found this little piece of right angled timber that I had laying around. You could probably use anything for this, so long as it's got that right angle on there. We're going to use the exact same process we did in the last one, but what we're going to do is actually push this down into that right angled corner. So you can see there I'm using a fair bit of pressure, and I am going around all these little edges as well, making sure that I'm pushing in all those thin bits of foam that are on the sides. Now I did also make a three-sided piece of rubble here. This was to go inside the ruined building. You can see up the top it's a corner piece. We'll show you that one just very shortly in the video. Once you've got those built, you're ready to start priming them. Now a big tip for this is to make sure you're priming this with a matte primer. Gloss primer won't take to this alfoil very well at all. Make sure you are getting around all the edges, and you want to probably attack this with a couple of different angles. So whether you're using a rattle can or an airbrush doesn't really matter, so long as it's a matte primer and you are getting a couple of different angles. You want to make sure you get a little bit under all of those edges as well. Now you can see here, this is the three-sided one I built up. You can see the back there is not very good. That was gloss primer. I learnt my lesson with that. Now you do want to make sure you prime these pretty well. Make sure that you get all of that all that alfoil covered up and blackened. And what we're going to do now is start adding some bits and pieces. So this was a leftover I-beam I had from the ruined building I did. I'll put a link to that at the top of the screen for you. I've also got some other leftover little I-beams that I made. These are slightly smaller ones. These were from my tank traps build that I did. I'll also put a link to that one at the top of the screen and in the description of the video for you. Now when it comes to adding these on, you obviously want to make sure these are the right size. With this cardboard I-beam I've got here, I found any craft knife should be able to get through this pretty simply. You want to make sure you've got a sharp blade as always. Now I'm going to hot glue these straight on here. Now this is going to make this a lot quicker than trying to PVA glue them on. There's no real need to be too clean with this either, as most of this is going to be covered up with certainly the alfoil sections of this are going to be covered up with rubble anyway. So make sure you add in a few extra little supports there for the glue. You can sort of, like I said, spread some glue around there, try to get in underneath some of these pieces as well so that they don't work loose over time. Now for the smaller I-beams, you probably want to sort of vary these around a little bit, try to make them look a little bit natural on there. You don't want to just sort of stick them straight on the top, maybe a bit on the side at a bit of an angle. We will be able to work some pieces of rubble into this to sort of surround them and cover them a little bit to make it look a lot more natural. So you can see with all those on there, it takes only a couple of seconds for that glue to set and they're ready to go. So now for the rubble pieces, what I've done is over some time here, I've just cut up some little scraps from the foam leftovers from all my builds here. It's a good idea to keep a little container of these handy if you can, save you throwing all this stuff out. Every now and then I'll just go through and start sort of chipping away at these and making these little this little container of rubble. Now attach this for this one, I've actually used PVA glue. To speed up this process you could probably use hot glue. You want to be pretty careful if you are, because it does get a bit messy and you want to make sure that you're getting this stuff stuck down. I chose PVA glue for this. You will need to use a fair bit, so you'll need to sort of smother this alfoil section with PVA glue, and depending on your PVA glue you might find this sort of running down the sides a little bit and getting a bit messy, so you might want to get yourself a piece of cardboard or something to sit this on while you're building this, and best idea is probably to go a few sections at a time so it doesn't get too out of control. As for these little bits of rubble, again, just little scraps of foam here that I've chipped away and made into smaller pieces. And you can basically just go around and start pressing these straight on. Now the PVA glue should hold these pretty well, depending on how much you use. Like I said, you probably want to make sure you've got a fair bit of PVA glue on there so that these will sit in there and dry pretty well. Now I'm going to keep going through here and do this for all three of these. I'm just going to work up this PVA glue and just pretty much smush all this rubble straight on there so that it sticks. Some of these will inevitably fall off as we go through the process. There's nothing really to worry about there. You can go back in and add some more if you need to, but I found the ones that fell off mine were fine. So long as you've got that alfoil base primed up pretty well, it doesn't matter if it has a few gaps in there. It really doesn't look terrible at all. So you can see as these are coming together now, they're looking pretty good. This PVA glue is going to take some time to dry, so while the build itself is really quick to put together, depending on the type of glue you're using, it can take a little while for this to dry here. So I was a bit short on other glue types for today, so I've actually gone through and just used PVA here instead. Now the next step is to probably give this a good prime with here is Mod Podge and black paint and water. So this is really quite thin down, and you can see here I'm actually not painting this on, I'm just kind of more dripping it on. It looks like I'm stippling there, but I've got a loaded brush that I'm just filling in this entire thing. So you want it running down into all the crevices and gaps of this rubble. This will actually help to keep it all stable and in place and give it a little bit of protection as you start throwing this around the battlefield and moving it around and transporting it. So whether you're using Mod Podge or you're using PVA glue with black paint, it doesn't really matter, but you do want it a little bit watered down so that you can get this all in there and make sure it is fully covering all those bits of foam. Now that'll add a good base for us to prime it. The one thing I do want to do once this is dry is actually add some more finer details to this. So having all those little chunks of foam on there is fine, but what I want to do is sort of show that this is actually parts of a ruined building. So what I'm going to go do here is I'm going to go through and get some slightly larger pieces of foam, and I'm going to chip these away and make them into little concrete blocks essentially. So ruined concrete blocks with some cracks and things on there. If you want a close-up of how I do these sorts of things, I did do them on my ruined building, my small ruined building recently, where they were kind of hanging off the ruined floors and stuff. So I'll put a link to that video above for you. What you want to do here is just sort of go through and just add a few of these larger pieces of foam concrete, if you like, and just sort of using hot glue I found was fine for this step. Just a little dab of hot glue on the bottom and just press these over. And what this will do is it'll give the impression of actually broken and cracked concrete for this rubble, as well as bits of rocks and stones. So I just felt this little bit of detail, whilst not necessary, it's certainly optional, definitely gave them a little bit more of a ruined concrete pile of rubble rather than just a bunch of rocks stuck down. So again, this is optional step here, but I found it really did add an extra element to this, so it might be worth doing. Again, it's just little pieces of leftover foam, so you shouldn't have too much finding those. If you've been building along with me in previous builds, you should have plenty of this stuff left over. Now I've gone on all of these ones that I've made up, so you can see in the top left of the screen, this one here. This one I did a second coat of PVA on to hold those all in. Honestly, that's not really necessary. We're only using a few little pieces of this foam here to accentuate that cracked concrete look. So here I'm just using a little piece of wire, that's like a speaker wire or something like that, and I'm just going to add these in as little bits of electrical cable sort of sticking out of this rubble as well. You can see there it's just quite simply a little bit of light pressure to roll that plastic coating on the wire, and you'll just be able to peel off a little bit and expose some of those wires. I found this was really effective to kind of give it another element in this pile of rubble. So to glue these in, you just find yourself a nice little groove or hole to stick this wire in, a little dab of PVA glue on there, and just set it into place. The PVA glue will hold really well, so you will be able to kind of move this wire around a little bit once that glue sets. So here I've just gone in and added a couple of different pieces there. You can see them sort of sticking out. Later on in the build, I'll paint these up and make them a little bit different color so that they do stand out some more. So So once we've got those in place, we can add more elements if we want to. Again, just some offcuts of corrugated paper. This is just leftover stuff from my builds previously. I used this corrugated paper in the shipping containers, which I'll link at the top of the screen there. That stuff's really cheap, just find it at the craft store. And I've used a couple of different shapes here. Some of these I want to be sort of protruding out of the rubble, and some of them I'll actually have sort of sitting near the top, so there'll be more full sheets of corrugated that'll be sticking out. So again, with these offcut little bits that you want protruding out, just find yourself a nice little groove where you can kind of stick this in, add a big dab of PVA glue, and sort of press this in. Now what you might want to do is add some folds or creases to some of this corrugated paper before you put it in. It can be a little bit tricky to try and bend this while that glue's setting, so if you want to, bend them up before you put them in. Otherwise you can certainly just wait for that glue to set and then sort of manipulate them around as you see fit, so that they look like they're a bit more naturally part of this rubble pile. So here you can see I'm just looking for places where I can stick this one in. I do want them sort of bent and hanging down, not necessarily poking straight out of this rubble. So find yourself some nice little grooves to put it in, add a big dab of hot glue into it, or PVA glue, whichever you prefer, and you should have no trouble getting these extra little bits of detail in there. Now when it comes to painting, I'm not going to do the painting of this one in this video. I have covered painting corrugated as a bit rusty, as well as painting the rocks. Did that for my barricades video. I did a particular painting video showing how you can paint those things up, so I will put a link to that one at the top of the screen for you as well. And that's pretty much that build done. So once you've got a little bit of paint on there, give it a bit of a dry brush, and as you can see, these are great little bits of scatter terrain for the table. You can move these around to wherever you want. They look fantastic. You can add all sorts of different things in there to give it extra detail and make it look really special. So I hope you've enjoyed this video. It was a fun one to make. I'm glad I got these for the table now. Thanks very much for watching, and don't forget to hit that like and subscribe button. I'll have a new video out shortly. Thanks again, guys. Take care.